Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another great episode of Crushing Strongholds. This is a podcast where we turn pain into power, trauma into triumph, and a place where we get to expose the lies of the enemies. And how do we do that? We do that through your testimony, and we do that through the Word of God, and we do that through the love of Jesus Christ. And today I'm super excited, as you will be able to tell through this episode, because I have a great guest with me today, and I'm super stoked to bring him on and have him share so much of what he's done. But first, I just want to let you know that this is the man who taught me how to push the play button on my own podcast that we're listening to today. And I'm super thankful, I'm grateful, and I'm very honored. This man not only has walked me through some of the fires that I went through, but he has several podcasts of his own. He's a wonderful coach, and not only just that, a mentor, but he's also become a friend. And I'm just honored, and I want to welcome Rory Paquette to Crushing Strongholds. So I let him come on and say hello.
Wow, Mickey, thank you so much for that. And yeah, it's I guess I did have a little bit to do with this whole explosion of yours, but I've just loved watching you get started and grow and just expand. And the fact that you're doing 5 shows right now is amazing. And I'm on the sideline, right now, just sort of cheering you on and liking your posts and doing everything I can to help further it because you're just doing some fantastic work. So thank you for inviting me to come on. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm excited, and I'm learning from the best of the best. I'm following your lead. So,
I'm tearing up now. I mean, seriously.
oh, well, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about some of the podcasts that you have, because you have many podcasts as well.
I do. Thank you for that. I've got 7 right now that are active and rolling. Power Man is my biggest and my best. We help husbands and fathers to kind of become more accountable and find that inner fire in life. We have the Podcaster Nation, which is my second biggest one. Power Man's a top 5 podcast, and the Podcaster Nation is a top 10% podcast. And that's where we interview people like you, who are podcasters. Let you guys tell your story. I started another podcast called Wake Up the Lions. So that's number 3. And that is for Christians to come on and give their testimony, talk about how God's influenced their lives and encourage others to do the same. Let's see, number 4 would then be Step Up to the Mic, where it's for public speakers who want to come on and uninterrupted, deliver their signature talk. So they get to come on and it's like being on a stage. And then they also have a audition tape to use after the episode comes out. So kind of win-win. 5th one is The Right Path, WRITE, Right Path podcast. And that's for authors who are, well, they've got books and they want to talk about them, but it's not just about the book. It's about the author and the story behind it. Number 6 is my Real Talk for Realtors podcast, which I resurrected from the scrap pile from years ago, changed everything I was doing with it. I used to be a real estate mentor. I'm not doing that anymore, but I am telling the stories of real estate professionals now and also teaching them how to podcast through that podcast as well. And so that's been fun. And then the final one is one that I co-host with a friend of both of ours, Brandon Lynette. And that one is Boiling Point, Faith and Fire. It's the only podcast that I co-host. It's the only one I've ever really co-hosted. If anybody but Brandon had asked me to do it, I probably wouldn't have. But Brandon and I go back, decades. And she's amazing. And it's a political podcast that has its roots in faith as sort of the cause for all of the political stuff that goes on. So I'm busy and it's been a lot of fun. I'm a podcast coach and a speaker coach in addition to those things, and absolutely love doing what I'm doing. I'm living my best life after all these years. So sorry to take so long, but that's
Oh
all of it
no,
right there.
no, that's good. That's awesome, actually. I mean, it's great. I have listened to most of those podcasts. I have not listened to all of them. I have not listened to the Step Up to the Mic one yet, but I need to look some of those up and see how that goes. See if I want to stick my foot in that direction or not.
Thanks.
I
Hey,
want to
we'll
step
always take the
into that.
download. We'll
Yeah,
always
I
take
want
the
to step up
downloads.
to
There you
that,
go.
and definitely get feedback on it and learn how to do it as things progress. Well, as you know, with my grandmother. So we're
Oh, yeah.
kind of, with that. So we just waiting. But this podcast, what I love about it is I know that everyone in the world, as we're going through all of our craziness, we all face strongholds and we get obstacles that we have to overcome. And sometimes we really have to reach out and lean on God to do that. And so I want to ask you today, do you have a story that you could share with our listeners where you had an obstacle that you just had to hurdle over and crush a stronghold in your life to get where you are today?
I've had too many of those, unfortunately, in my very short 55 years on this planet. Yeah, I've encountered that a lot. That's something when you and I, were working together before, I loved what you were doing because I personally have been through so many of those instances. And I think everybody has at some point. So I mean, let's see. The one to actually talk about, maybe that I haven't talked about before, too much. I've been through the ringer with building and losing businesses, with rough childhood, abusive things, stuff like that. I've also, lost it all at one point. I have made the decision in my past to no longer be here, and somehow God saved me from that. I've also faced not being here through a medical situation, which should have killed me and didn't. At the end of all of that, though, I was faced with a big decision about what was I going to do with my future. My kids were all grown, and empty nest syndrome had set in. My wife and I kind of sat down on the couch after my youngest one finally left the nest, and we looked at each other and went, "Hi, nice to meet you. Now what do we do?" Because we literally had dedicated 3 decades of our lives to raising all three of our kids and preparing for it and everything else. And we kind of were like, what are we going to do now? So, at that point, I didn't have any other choice. I had faith come back into my life. I had God make himself very, very visible in my life with, the surgery that I had that should have killed me and things like that. And all of that sort of came together. And I said, I need to change. I can't keep doing what I'm doing. I had been doing podcasting and coaching and everything else on the side for a long time and loved every minute of it. And I also had been working another job, and that had been, sort of, helping to pay the bills, but I didn't really need it anymore. I just felt like I had to have that piece of security. That was one of my strongholds I had to get over, was the fear of that lack of money, that fear of failure, and that fear of scarcity, all that kind of thing in my life. And getting over that would have been impossible. But after having come back in touch with my faith and with my relationship with God that I had never really had before, I did something I had never really done, and I just said, I'm going to pray. I'm just going
Yeah.
to put my head down. I'm going to find a quiet place, and I'm going to just simply pray. And I'm going to say, God, what should I do? How do I do this? Can you help me and show me the way? And it was probably the first time in my life that I actually surrendered myself and said, I have no preconceived notion here. Lead me and I'll follow. Because, you try to be obedient, but when you're a stubborn, old Italian set in your way dude, obedience is the last word on your list. It's right there next to vulnerability. It's like a bad word. So, but that moment where I had to decide what to do next, my wife and I talked about it. She said, wherever you feel led, you got to go, and we'll figure it out. We made a huge decision to, sell a bunch of stuff, downsize, eliminate expenses, move, relocate. Because, why do you need a 3,000 square foot house with 3 bedrooms and everything else when all your kids are gone? Why am I paying for all that? So all of that stuff we made a decision to do, and we went almost minimalist and cut everything down and got rid of a bunch of nonsense in our lives. And I went full time, being a podcaster, being a podcast coach, everything that I'm doing today. And when I did that, I wasn't even really afraid to do it because I just knew I was being led there. And so I think that's probably the story that I think defines me now more than all the other ones. I'm really not the abused kid who survived anymore. I'm not the guy who lost everything and found a way to come back by working 3 jobs and sleeping 1 hour a night for 6 months. I'm not the guy who almost died going into the hospital and then almost died on the surgery table. So twice in a week, when you almost die. It's like, okay, he wants me here for a reason. I got to figure out what that is. And instead of trying to figure it out on my own, I opened myself up to it and I said, you know what, God, I'm going to stop trying to figure everything out. Tell me what I need to know and guide me where I need to go. And I will. And I did. And
It's
here
really
we are.
awesome. I love that your wife is like backing you 100% and just saying, you know what, wherever you go, where, because, as a husband and a family, that's what men are supposed to do in the family. And not a lot of women surrender to that. So I think that's wonderful that your wife has said, wherever you go, that's where you need to go. And I think it's interesting that you said, obedience is the hardest thing, but once you surrender and you start leading, you are walking in that obedience 100% of the way. So that's a huge step. You should give yourself a little credit for that because it's really hard to be obedient to God um, when when we have our own ideas of what we kind of want to do in life. And it may not necessarily be what God has designed for us or the assignment He's given us. And so sometimes we take the wrong path and we end up, like you say, with a lot of extra weight, a lot of extra burden, a lot of extra, what am I doing with all this stuff? I love that you said that when you got rid of everything, you just got rid of the nonsense. And I think it brings peace to your life because you don't have so much stuff in your way blocking you from the vision God wants you to see when you get rid of the nonsense, you know? And
That was
I think
huge.
it
Yeah.
also ignites relationships, it makes your relationships stronger with people. Like you said, once your kids all left the house, you probably were like, oh, it's me and you again. What are we going to do now? Now you get to go on dates and vacations and enjoy each other's company or whatever you guys want to do. But it's a time to reunite, that very first spark that started the whole process with you guys. So I think that's really a wonderful testimony because I think a lot of people honestly don't look at stuff like that like they should, and just taking the opportunity to let God lead you where He wants you to go and open those doors for you, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
It does. I appreciate that. It's kind of exactly what happened. We both decided when we got together. Um, I mean, the reason that we decided to be together was we had very, very similar ideas of where we wanted to go and what was important. And we knew that we wanted to have kids, we wanted to raise a family, and we wanted them to be the priority in our lives. We wanted to live lives to raise them, to produce the best people we could. And, I know there's a lot of, thinking, especially in today's world, that says, oh, no, you got to take care of you and you know, you got to put on your air mask when the plane's going down so you can help everybody else do it. I'm like, yeah, look, the bottom line is if there's four people at the table and there's three pieces of chicken, you didn't do your job. And the one who has got to sacrifice is the one that was supposed to put the chicken on the table. So that's me. And so I always looked at everything and said, if we don't have enough, I'm going to sacrifice. They're the most important people here. And I tried to, create situations where my wife didn't have to do that, but then she chose to do that. She's like, well, I'm going to sacrifice too, because then they have everything they need. I never asked her to. I never tried to include her in that. I tried to actually put everything out there so she never had to. Even when there was enough, she still chose to make sure they had more. So we've had similar mentalities the whole time we've been together, and that hasn't changed today. We're stronger now than we've ever been because we actually can see each other through all of the haze since we got everything else out of the way. So it's very rewarding to have done what we've done, raised three kids who are as fantastic and as successful as they are, and to be sitting here enjoying it right now and say, what are we going to do now for us? It really is kind of cool.
Now, I know that you've had both of your boys on a podcast. I think on
Mhm.
Power of Man, right? You had them on.
Yes,
What about
right.
your wife? Have you ever done a podcast with her?
I haven't. We've talked about it. My wife is not. Let's put it this way. My wife is the perfect complement to me. And as much as I am the talk all the time, put myself out there, don't care what anybody thinks of me. My wife is exactly the opposite. So we've talked about it, but she has really said that's really not where I need to be. So I don't
She's
think I'll ever get her on a podcast. But if she ever said to me, "Hey, I'd like to be a guest in your podcast," I would drop everything, put her on a podcast immediately,
right,
and we'd go. I mean, it's not me keeping her off the podcast.
right. Oh yeah, I
Yeah.
figured.
So she doesn't want any part of it. And my daughter also hasn't been on the podcast because of her choice. She's very private, especially on social media. And she's just like, I don't want anybody knowing my business, but thanks, Dad. You put yourself out there, that's fine. If the boys want to do that, that's their problem. But I'm not going to put all my stuff out there in a podcast. So the women in our family are both, very personal and keep to themselves. And all the men in our family are boisterous and gregarious and, don't shut up.
Yeah. Love that though. That'd be exciting. I think that'd be a wonderful podcast if she ever did come on. Just because, how well you say she compliments you, it'd be awesome just to see it. And
Yeah.
I'm sure people that are around you and around your family and around your life, they see that, on a personal level, not on a stage front level. So
Yeah.
I'm sure it shows there anyway. So, I mean, just, the way you talk about her shows it as well, because she seems like a wonderful, wonderful lady. And
Thanks.
yeah, it's exciting when you think about the transitions that God puts in your life. That just like doing the podcast, like when you started with me, and God pushed me into doing podcasting, I was like, no way, there's absolutely no way I'm doing this. And I really did not think this is where I wanted to go, but God kept pushing me. And I told my daughter, and my daughter said, "There's no way you're going to do that. You don't like your picture taken. You don't like your voice. You don't like, you don't even like people to record if you're in the room, like, you know." And it took me getting over a huge amount of fear, like this, to push play. I mean, you just like you can't keep recording 40 episodes and deleting them. You have to push play eventually. And
At
so
some
I
point, you got to
did.
publish some. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, get it published. And I hated my first episode, like you said, I hated it. I was like, I want to take it down. And you said, no way. But I think that, when we overcome strongholds, like some of my story too, but where, I was raised in a lot of fear and stuff with rejection and abandonment in my life. So it always brings up the thought in my mind, like, nobody's gonna like this. I'm gonna get, all this adversity, and then I'm gonna have all this fear. But that didn't happen. It was interesting because God actually opened doors, and I got to meet some amazing people. I'm sure you've met. I mean, I know you've met hundreds of people, and what a great way to just even share the ministry. Especially with Waking Up the Lions that you do, and the Boiling Point podcast. Because I've known her for a long, long time, and so um, she's really wonderful too. But I think that God opens those doors for a reason. It's our choice whether we step through it or not. And I think
For
sometimes we
sure.
don't do that. We just sit at the doorway and we can't make up our mind, and we don't make up that decision because we're scared, you know, if that makes
Yeah,
any sense.
for sure. 100% it does. You nailed it right on the head. It is up to us every step of the way. So, and it's funny, just to go back real quick. My wife really has supported everything that I've done, even the really stupid stuff. She's supported it, and she's always said, she'll give me her opinion. She'll weigh in. But at the end of it, she's like, look, you do whatever you feel like you got to do, wherever you feel like you're being called, and we'll ride it out. It's either going to work or it won't.
Yeah,
And either way, we'll make it work.
my phone. Sorry about
So
that.
it's okay.
I thought it was on airplane mode. Yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
awesome that she supports you in that way, because a lot of people don't have any support in that area.
Yeah.
So it's nice that, you have somebody pulling for you and rooting, and, like your little, having a cheerleader in the background for you. Sometimes it's nice to have that.
Yeah. And don't kid
And
yourself, okay? She's a little Italian gal, so she's also my harshest critic.
well,
If I say
good,
something
good.
stupid, she's going to be like, really? You had to go there?
Yeah.
Seriously? I'm like, hey, I just where I felt led. She's like,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But
Yeah.
so she doesn't necessarily like everything that I do, but she supports it in the end.
Oh, well, that's good. That's good.
Yeah, it's good.
I mean, sometimes when we're watching the team and they lose, we still got to support them. If we're on the
Kinda, yeah,
cheerleading side of the fence.
exactly. Yeah,
You
I'm
can't
sure she
just
can
go, I'm
identify
going
with
to
that
that side. They won, I'm going over there. I think we all
for
make
sure.
those decisions and those mistakes. I know that I've made plenty of them. Even doing podcasting, I've gotten on and forgot what I was going to say right when I hit record, and I was like, "Oh my goodness, what is happening today?" But it's been a great and fun adventure, and I've really enjoyed branching out. So I didn't realize you had 7 podcasts now. I thought you had 5, but um, I think it's interesting how, like, our desires shift and they change, And then God kind of, for me, God is like yay or nay, because I've had some people ask me, and I don't know if you've ever felt this way when you're going with your podcast, like somebody will say, hey, I want to do this on your podcast. And you're like, well, let me think about that and I'll get back to you. And it's just a no, you're like, no, I'm sorry that I don't really feel like that fits what I'm doing here.
Right.
And that's really hard to do that. Like you said, it's your show. You got to pick and choose who you put on it. And
Yep.
I was like, oh my goodness, saying no was one of the hardest things I ever did, I think, with this podcast.
Oh
And I
yeah.
had to explain myself in a roundabout way to where I didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but I didn't think it was a good idea to have them on the show, you know? And so I
Yeah.
don't know if you've encountered that or what you've done with that obstacle. Can you share some of that with me?
Sure. I'd love to. It is your show. I got a feeling you were quoting me right there because I do say that all the time
Yeah.
to everybody that I meet. It is your show. If I'm commenting on a post on Facebook or something about podcasters, I'm like, it's your show. There's no rules. It's not like if you do something different than everybody else, you lose your membership card and you can't be a podcaster anymore. So, one of my things is it is your show. It's an extension of who you are. It's who you are personally too. It's very personal when you do a podcast. So, I've had people who have said, "Hey, I'd love to be on your show," and I'm just like, I really can't right now. Sometimes I'll try and be nice, like we're just really booked, right now, so I can't. Sometimes I'm like, it's just not a good fit. But thanks, because I'm just one of those guys. I just don't care what people think of me at all. I mean, if you don't like me, fine. Get in line. There's lots of other people like you that don't like me.
Right.
I don't care. That they're not putting food on my table. So I've even had a guy who, yeah, I interviewed him or, talked to him ahead of time, did some research. We chatted, we set up the appointment. He comes on, everything seemed fine. He comes on for the interview and shows up being a total jerk.
Mm.
He was some stunt man or something who apparently was having a bad day and thought that he was all that. And I'm just verifying some information. I'm like, okay, well, your book is titled this, and it's about this. Yes. And he goes, yeah. Did you do any research on me? And I'm like, I just gave you the name of the book, bro. Yeah.
Wow.
I'm double checking, and I said, and your last name is pronounced, this way. And he goes, okay, so you didn't do any research. I said, you know what? This isn't a good fit. And I hung up. It was goodbye. You're
Oh,
done.
wow.
Yeah. I'm not going to be nice. Come
Wow. That's bold.
Oh, you know what? I've been doing this a long time. I mean, I've done over 1,000 episodes and I don't have, that whole, I have no tolerance anymore for nonsense. If you want to come on the podcast and talk about, you and your course or your book or your mission or whatever it is, or your podcast, great. Let's have a great conversation. If you're showing up with a bunch of nonsense, click. I don't need that in
Done
my life.
deal.
No, I'm not desperate, for any interview or something. It's like, you know what? I got 100 other people who want to be on the show. Goodbye. See you later. I just think that's how you have to handle not only your podcast, but honestly, I think more of us need to handle our lives that way. And I've handled my life that way for a very long time.
Yeah.
And I don't plan on changing that anytime soon.
Yeah, you seem like the same as when I met you. No, just
I probably am.
kidding. Yeah.
I'm that
But
same guy, unfortunately.
that makes you who you are. I love that. I think it's important. We don't have to change for people. We don't need, I lived in a world where I always had to get validation,
Mhm.
until somebody said, why do you always need to be validated? Like you got to get that card stamped in the parking garage, And I remember one time leaving the parking garage and going, I don't have to be validated. I mean, Jesus
Yeah,
Christ validated us when he went to the cross. And someone told me that, and I was like,
exactly.
that hit me so hard.
Mhm.
I was like, oh my gosh. And it took baby steps and went from the parking lot to the cross before I to realize I did not need any validation from people. I could be who I am, be my own person.
Oh, yeah.
And that was huge. That was a huge, comment to be said. And I was like, I'm using that. I'm using that in my podcast because that
That's
was
strong.
good.
Yeah, that is strong. I love that.
Yeah, because I think that sometimes when we start something new, we want everyone's opinions and their thoughts on it. But do we sometimes? Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. I think, I don't know about you. Well, you're at a place now where, like you said, it's yours and you don't care anymore.
I
I'm
don't want
still a
anybody else's
newbie.
opinion. Yeah, I don't want anybody else's opinion. You know what? It's
Yeah.
between me, my wife, and God. If my wife gives me the okay, and
Oh,
if I,
good.
and I pray and I feel like I'm being led to do it, I just don't care. I
Yeah.
can have, When I was getting ready to release, I'll share this quick story with you. And I've probably told you about this before, but your listeners may not know this. When I decided I was going to put out Wake Up the Lions,
Hmm.
the advertisement for it is, a place for Christians, and I use that word, which apparently is a bad word on social media, to come together and share their testimony. And that was the whole thing. It wasn't like some big long dissertation of what it was. That's all I said about it. And hey, it's launching this week. Hope you guys will tune in. And I put it in a reel on Facebook and I sent it out. And within a day, I had over 300 comments on it, and I had about 250-ish were all negative or
Hmm.
threatening or like really just poisonous.
Hmm.
And I mean, I read every one of them, because
Hmm.
I was like, wow, this is a whole new level of hate here.
Wow.
And what, a lot of people take that. When I first would get the hate back in the early days of Power of Man, that would bother me. But I'm a guy who's had 4 death threats,
Oh,
actual
wow.
death threats, because of what I say or the people who come on my podcast and what they say. And after 4 death threats, I'm amused by it now. And I read the comments on there and I went, if they're not firing at you, then you're not over the target.
Hmm.
So I must be squarely above the target, which means it's time to fire away.
Yeah.
And I should be doing what I'm doing. The more hate you get for something like that, the more you need to be doing it. And I launched, and boy, all those haters just disappeared once we launched. It was really amazing. They went back to their mom's basements with their purple hair and their Cheetos and everything else, and said, "Hey, here we go." Not that I'm against purple hair, as long as it's used
Right.
correctly. I just I'm like whatever.
Yeah, I
So
think it's interesting
yeah,
that you say that because there's so much toxicity in the world that um, they want it to become contagious, and we could let it be, we could let it be contagious to us if we allow it. And when I started this podcast, I shared this with you when I first met you that another individual that I was talking with wanted me to not do a Christian based podcast. I think I shared that with you.
yep,
And I wasn't going to. I almost didn't do it. Remember? And I talked to you and you said, "No, I think what you're doing is in your heart and that's what you need to do." And I was like, "I know, but I don't, I'm already getting flack from, And you're like, "But that's what you need to do." And you know what? I've not regretted it one moment. Not one
good for
moment.
you. Good,
And I've
good.
not had any negative talk. I've not had anybody because people are sharing, things that they've gone through where God has actually saved them, and pulled them out of the fiery pit of hell.
Yeah, it's
And
important.
if there's something wrong with telling people that, then there's something wrong with their heart. They need to get out of the pit of hell, I think, if they're still stuck there.
Right.
And, when I think about Jesus, Jesus was hated before anybody was hated. So I always think if they hate Christianity, then Jesus, what it says in the Bible is 100% true. It's true to the fact that if they're going to hate me for being a Christian, it's because they hated Jesus first, not me, you know? And so
Hmm.
when we think about the word Christian, it came from that. It came from, them, mocking him. It was a mockery word for Jesus. And even though Christianity, is a discipleship terminology to get discipled underneath the feet of Jesus, not through
Hmm.
anybody else. And
Right.
I find it interesting that I had a friend that actually said, "You know what? I'm not going to Christian anymore. I'm just not going to Christian anymore." I'm like, "How do you not Christian anymore?" She's like, "Because when I say I'm a Christian, people just growl and they're angry." And I'm like, that to me, that would make me want to be a Christian even more. I think if because I truly believe in Jesus Christ as my savior and I follow him and I want him to lead me like he's leading you. And and I can't go around telling people that and then back down from saying I'm a Christian. I just don't want to back down. I'm like you.
Yeah.
If you're getting the fiery darts thrown at you, then you're actually probably right where you need to be. you know and not everybody's
Absolutely.
going to agree with us, and that's okay. I don't care if they don't agree. They can think how they want to think, but I can think how I want to think too. And that's what I try to tell people. I'm not mad at you for how you think. Don't be mad at me for how I think or what I believe
Amen.
in. You know,
Absolutely.
if you want to choose the fiery pit of hell, well, I'll pray for you. I will pray for you. And, you know, I'm not even going to throw the good book at you. I'm not going to Bible thump you. I'm just going to pray for you because there's,
Yep.
some people you can't do that. You know, they're
That's
going to
all you
just
can do.
come at you. Huh?
That's all you can do is pray for them at that
Yeah.
point. You know,
And
so
it's
good for
interesting
you.
because, my other podcast, we're talking about prayer because prayer is mentioned over thousands of times in the Bible. And yet I think that we don't do it enough. And sometimes when we don't do it, or when we do it, it's not even a real prayer. We've talked about that, how we just kind of go, oh, thank you God for this food, and then we shovel our food in our face, because
Right,
we're just
just gluttony right there.
eyeballing and drooling over the cheeseburger. Like, oh, I gotta bless my food. Thanks God for the food, and you start scarfing. And then you choke on your food and you wonder why, because it's not even blessed yet. But I think we do that in our prayer lives too. Like if we're just praying to go through the motions, then we're not doing it for the right reason.
Yeah,
You know, God's not a
totally.
box we check off every day. And a friend of mine told me that too. And I was like, I love that because we do sometimes put God in a box and we just check him off each day. Did I read my devotion? Okay, done. Did I say a prayer? Done. You know what I mean? Now let me get back to me. Let me get back to my stuff, what I want to do. And crushing strongholds has really taught me to, how do you get over things that are crushing you in your life if you don't start leaning on God like we're supposed to be? He says we are not to be carrying those burdens. We're supposed to give them to him. So we need to be doing that. And so I think it's great that you fully surrendered. I mean, that is so huge. And I'll be honest with you, I don't hear a lot of men say that. I hear women say it often. And so women go, "Oh, I had to surrender. I just had to surrender." I get that. I don't hear men say that too often. I hear men go, "Yeah, I had to have a talk with God." I'm sure. Oh, I'm sure you did. But to
Right.
surrender is a huge. That's a huge crushing of a stronghold because a lot of people, like you said, I'm strong and I'm the man of the house and I'm, I'm, whatever. It's kind of not, I don't want to say a power trip kind of thing, but when you're the head of your household, um, if you're not being surrendered to God, how can your family follow you?
Right.
How can you lead your family to God if you don't surrender to God first? And so it's a huge step to take to surrender for anyone at that point, especially if you're leading a family.
Yeah.
And I love what you're doing. I love that you're doing all these different topics, and I love that they're Christian based, and people get to talk about real life stuff. And it's okay. It's okay to have strongholds. I think people go when I talk to them about strongholds, they're like, "Oh, I don't know if I want to talk about that." Can we talk about the cushy stuff? You know,
Right.
the fun stuff? And I'm like, yeah, we can. We could talk about that all day long too. But what have you actually overcome? What has God actually done in your life? Kind of like that Janet, what is it? Janet Jackson. What have you done for me
What have you
lately
done for me
song?
lately?
Yeah, can we get back to what God's done for you lately? Because we're so self-absorbed. I think about that, and I when I sing that, I always say, "What have you done for me lately, God?" And I'll be
Yeah.
singing it, and I'll be like, "I'm talking about you, God, not anybody else." So it's just kind of
Wow.
funny when you bring it all into that realm that you want to be pleasing to God. You want to be in that walking in that obedience, like you said. That's hard.
Yeah.
I found that
It
to be the
is.
hardest thing to do is to
It
even try
is.
to walk in it.
They're just not words that we accept. Especially as men, we don't accept the word surrender.
Hmm.
We're not brought up that way.
Right.
And as soon as you say that word, then that is equal to I've lost, and it's not. Your ego cannot be so strong that it prevents you from taking care of the people who are depending on you. And that's just one of the other tenets that I live my life by, and that is that I started this with the power of man, but I've been living my life this way my whole life. The people who depend on you have to be more important to you than you are to you. And I get so much flack for that because people are like, oh, self-care and this and that. And I'm like, look, I'm not saying don't take care of you. I'm simply saying that you got to take care of the people who depend on you first.
Right.
You got to take care of them because they're depending on you. You brought them into the world, or you promised them when you married them, and you said, hey, these are the people. I'm going to be here for you. And so if you're not, then you're letting them down. Now, be there for those people who depend on you. And then, you know what? Go refill your cup and get ready for the next time that you need to be there for them. So I've always practiced that. That does actually go hand in hand with surrender. Because if your ego is so big that you can't surrender to God, then you aren't serving the people who depend on you. So, there's no weakness in surrendering to God. That's where you get your strength from. No, I'm not going to surrender to any other earthly, body or man or anything else. But the Lord, I will kneel in front of him all day, every day.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Good word right there, actually. I think it's interesting when we talk about that because um, the word surrender itself, means laying it all down. You just lay it all down. And not everybody wants to do that. They're like, I'm going to just lay down a little bit. I'll give you about 10%,
Right. Still gonna
maybe
hold
if
on
you're
to
lucky.
this over here. Yeah, but
Yeah, and you're carrying the other three quarters on your back still,
mhm.
and it's weighing you down. And people don't realize that once you do that, though, God actually ends up helping you because God is one of his characteristics, which I find interesting, is that he designed us to serve, not
Mhm.
always to take, but to give.
Mhm. Yep.
So he designed us with more giving than taking, actually. So as a service, when you have children, that's why they're called dependents on your tax form, is because they depend on you. And the
Right.
government gives you money for, that child credit because they depended on you. Not that it's a lot, but we get that.
Right.
And so there are people that are going to depend on you, and there's people that you're going to depend on, as well. And so I think it's interesting that you say that because when we surrender and we have to lay stuff down, we don't always want to take that into account. We don't want to do that. We want to hold back,
Right.
some of it. But when we surrender all of it, that's when God can actually work with you, because there's nothing else in the way from what he has planned for you. He can actually take you to such a higher level, and there's so much freedom in that when you surrender everything that it's so freeing. Only, to the mind, to people around you will see it as well. They'll be like, man, what's different about that person? And it's because you're free. You're not walking around with all that nonsense that you said, that we carry.
Nonsense.
I mean, now I feel like I have to purge my house after this conversation. I'm going to get busy when I get off the phone. I'm going to have a yard sale tomorrow, because I
That's
think that we accumulate things that we do not need. It's nonsense. The stuff that we put our time and effort and our money into instead of one another, instead of people. And if we served each other more, we wouldn't live in such a toxic world,
yeah.
I believe. When we're
I
actually
agree.
caring for one another instead of
Mhm.
hating one another and taking from one another. Because I think that we do
Yeah.
that in this world. But I don't know. I find it hard with everything going on in the world, what to do with that because sometimes you just want to jump on the TV screen and shake tar out of somebody and be like, just knock it off for 5 seconds. Just get over yourself for just a minute. If we could only do that in reality, right? Because
Right.
that's what had to happen to me. Someone had to, take me and shake me up a little bit and be like, hey, something's got to change. Something's got to give. If you want to get out of the dark place that you're in, you're going to have to, make a decision. You're going to have to choose to get out of this dark place. You can stay in the pit or in the basement with purple hair, whatever, as long as you want. But you're not going to get out unless you make that choice to do so.
For sure.
So I think
Absolutely.
that's really, really, really awesome. Well, I'm going to start wrapping this up, but I just wanted to ask you one more question. If you could tell our listeners one thing that you think helped to shape and mold you to become the person you are today, that gave you the strength where you're at today, what would that strength be?
Hmm.
Besides God, we know God did a lot.
Well, I mean, God gets the glory for all of it, but God has sent some things to me over the years and has given me things to help. And honestly, that's a pretty simple answer. My wife
Oh,
gets
good.
all the credit for all of it because God put her in my life in the most unique of circumstances. Uh, we never should have met in a million years. If you go back and look at everything, we were one fraction of a millisecond away from never even meeting. And she came into my life at a time when I really needed a light, and she was that light. And in every dark spot in my life, every time there's been something that really where evil was really going to get a hold of me, where the devil was going to just drag me down for good. Every time I've turned around to look, she's always been sort of the bringer of that light. And I credit it to her that, it's her light, but I know that that also comes from her faith. My wife has done so much for me, but she also did it for her family. When I was fighting my relationship against God, because I was so angry that He had allowed all these horrible things to happen in my life and to my family and to my mother and everything else that went on. I was very angry with Him. I never doubted His existence, but man, I was ticked off. I didn't know how to raise my kids in faith. And my wife and I talked about it, and I said, I want them to be raised with it, but I can't do it. I'm just recognized my own failure and my own anger. And she took that on completely. And she kept the fire burning. And I mean, my children have been fully exposed to faith. It's a huge part of their lives. My youngest is actually pursuing becoming a associate pastor at his church where he volunteers all the time, in addition to everything else he does, running his business. So she is the one who kept that light alive for them. She's the one that has kept me going. And, when the doctor said, sorry, I'm getting a little choked up. When the doctor said that I had a 20% chance to come through the surgery that I had, I came through that surgery because of her. When I came out of it, she's what I was thinking of. And she's the one that got me through everything afterwards. And she's the one who's still putting up with me today for no reason. That woman could do better than me on accident, okay? And she's still with me to this day, Mickey. So she's everything to me, and that's what's gotten me through.
Wow, that's really awesome to say that. You better have her listen to this podcast because she's gonna get teary-eyed. I think that's wonderful that you say that.
Thanks.
I love that how much you honor your wife because, there's a lot of people out there that don't honor what they have, their families and their lives and whatnot. And
Yeah,
I respect that so much for you sharing that. And that's really awesome.
thanks.
Is there any links or any information you want to give to our listeners if they would like to get a hold of you for some coaching? Or do you want them just to message you, or I will put your
Yeah.
link in my show notes, or are you available right now for coaching still? You are, right? Do you have open
Hmm.
spots? I know you're pretty booked, so
Yeah.
I'm sure our listeners are like, "Hey, I want this guy to start coaching me."
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, you and I talked about it before the show. I'm coaching more people now than I ever have, but I
Mm,
cut way back on my interviewing. I was following some of my own advice. I got way ahead with my podcasts. I have 3 months of content on all of my podcasts already created. So I said, all right, we're going to cut back the interviewing so that I can increase time dedicated towards coaching people and helping people to achieve what they are trying to do. So I definitely have room for more clients, even though I have more clients than I've ever had. It's a blessing place to be right now for me. As far as contacting me, I am an old school, old guy, perfect, easy to get a hold of. Go to Facebook or Instagram and just type in at my name, Rory Paquette. That's it, at RORYPAQUETTE. I'm sure that will be in the show notes for you someplace. Just my name on Facebook or Instagram. Both accounts are, content creator business accounts. They're wide open. Check it out. Send me a message on either platform. I respond to messages all the time. You know this. We've talked at 3 o'clock in the morning before, so it's not a problem, and that's the easiest way to reach me for anything. And all the information for all my podcasts is available there as well. So best way to do.
Okay, awesome. I appreciate that. I'll definitely make sure that I include that in our show notes so if people want to get a hold of you or contact you, or even listen to your podcasts. That'll
That'd
be
be
awesome
okay
so they
too.
can go and listen to you
That's right.
and subscribe and like and share and engage. I try to
You got
encourage that even with this
it.
podcast. So, well, I think it's been wonderful times, talking with you today and really enjoyed your conversation. I've always enjoyed our conversations together, whether we're recording or not. So, I've enjoyed your coaching, and like I said, I consider you a mentor and a coach, but I also consider you a friend, and I've just greatly have been blessed to have met you and get to know you. I thank you for sharing your testimony today, and I know our listeners will enjoy it. And so, with that being said, to our listeners, if you do want any coaching for speaking or podcasting, Rory is the guy to call. He's your man. He's your go-to. You can go to him. If you are looking for an out or have an obstacle or a stronghold that you are trying to overcome and need to get through a breakthrough, need to have some bondage broken, or even to get out of that pit of hell, you can reach me at crushingstrongholds.com and go to my website, fill out the information there, and send me a little message, and I will get back to you. So, with that being said, Rory, thank you so much. Thank you for being here. It's been a pleasure to have you. And I hope you
Thanks for
come
having me
back.
on. I'll come back anytime, and thank you for having me on. It's been absolutely a delight, and you're doing fantastic. Keep up the good work.
Thank you. I give that credit to you, by the way. So, to our listeners, I hope you all have a great day. And this has been another great episode of Crushing Strongholds. Y'all stay well. God bless and take care.